We are in Matthew 27 tonight, and I don't know if we will finish the chapter or not. This is the climax of Matthew. We are going to see the final trial of Jesus. Then we are going to see his crucifixion. And I don't know if we will finish the chapter to see his death and burial, but if we do, then we will go on through that. There are people in our group that are going through a very hard time right now, a very trying time. And as we're going through this, it's easy to read this as a story. But you need to know that this was real. It happened. And for those of you going through your trials, Jesus understands. Jesus knows. He's been in these kind of trials. So let's pick up in 27:1. Well, before we do that, last week we saw an illegal trial last week, and that illegal trial was at Caiaphas's palace, and Caiaphas is the high priest, and it was a very illegal trial at night. And now it's morning time, and Jesus hasn't slept. And so what's happened in the last night is Jesus has celebrated the Passover, the Last Supper, with his disciples, and Judas went and got the guard, if you will. And Jesus took his disciples out to go pray at the Mount of Olives, and then Jesus went into the Garden of Gethsemane. And that's where Judas led the mob. Judas betrayed Jesus with a kiss. And then they went to Caiaphas's palace and went through an illegal trial. And now the sun has come up. And Jesus has not slept. 27:1. When morning came, all of the chief priests and the elders of the people took counsel against Jesus to put him to death. So how many of the chief priests and elders took counsel?
All of them.
All of them. And what did they take counsel against him to do?
To put him to death, to kill him.
These are people of the book. These are people that hold the law very tightly. And they're about to kill the author of the book. It's very possible to know the book and not know the author. It's very possible to know the book and hate the author. And we see this. Verse 2, and they bound him and led him away and delivered him over to Pilate, the governor. So they just finished an illegal religious trial. And now they bound him, and where are they taking him to?
Pilate, the governor.
So now it's going from a religious trial, which is bad enough, and now they're going to a legal trial, a governmental legal trial. Verse 3. Then when Judas, his betrayer, saw that Jesus was condemned, he changed his mind and brought back the 30 pieces of silver to the chief priests and the elders. Did Judas hear about Jesus being condemned? What does the Bible say?
That he saw in my version.
He saw it. When we look at this, he changed his mind. What do you think that Judas really wanted Jesus to die?
It doesn't sound like it.
Doesn't sound like it. And what did he do with the 30 pieces of silver?
He returned them to the chief priests and the elders.
That's right. In verse 4, it says, this is Judas speaking, and he's saying, I have sinned by betraying innocent blood. Did he know that Jesus was innocent?
Absolutely.
Okay, so now we see an acknowledgement of sin. Okay. And they said, what is that to us? See to it yourself. Were the elders and the chief priests, were they compassionate with Judas over this?
Not at all.
Not at all. Verse 5, and throwing down the pieces of silver into the temple, he departed and he went and hanged himself. What did Judas do?
Unalived himself.
He unalived himself. He hung himself. There was an acknowledgement of sin. But he was with Jesus for 3 years, and he still didn't get this repentance thing. He didn't get it. He didn't understand that he could go back to Jesus and seek forgiveness, and the guilt was too much for him. And he hung himself. Verse 6, but the chief priests, taking the pieces of silver, said, it is not lawful to put them into the treasury, since it's blood money. Did the religious elite care about Judas? No. They were following the law to the T. They can't deposit this money back into the temple because it's blood money. Who was the people that paid the blood money?
It was them.
It was them. Are they finding fault in themselves at all? Not at all.
So
They're all-
question, they used treasury money to pay him, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So they took counsel and bought with them the potter's field as a burial place for strangers. What did they do with the money?
They bought the potter's field.
And what was the potter's field going to be used for?
Unknown people. Foreigners.
Foreigners. So now they're saying, because he killed himself, he's not part of Israel. This is a post-mortem excommunication of Judas. Therefore, that field has been called the field of blood to this day. Now, I want you to hold your finger here, and I want you to go to Acts chapter 1. And we will go to verse 17 in Acts chapter 1. And this is when they were looking to replace Judas as an apostle. And it says, "For he was numbered among us and was allotted his share in this ministry. Now this man acquired a field with the reward of the wickedness, and falling headlong, he burst open in the middle, and all his bowels gushed out. And it became known to all the inhabitants of Jerusalem, so that the field was called in their own language Al-Qadama, that is, the field of blood." Now, I've put a lot of study into this over the last year because I've been teaching through Jeremiah. This is a lot deeper than you think it is. If you've been following my Jeremiah study, you'll notice that there's a place called the Valley of the Sons of Hinnom. And in that valley is a small little town called Topheth. And in Hebrew, the word Topheth means to burn and to drum. And what would happen in the valley of the son of Hinnom especially at Topheth, is where they would go and do child sacrifice to the god Molech. And Molech was a demon god, and archaeologists have found altars to Molech, and it's two bronze hands looking like this. And they would heat up the hands to where they were glowing hot, and they would take that 3-month-old infant alive, and they would place the infant into the hands of Molech to be burned alive. And they would drum to drown out the screaming from the children. That area, Jesus gave a name for that area in the New Testament. It's the same field that Judas bought. In the Greek, it's called Gehenna. It was the garbage dump. And it was perpetually on fire. Things would just burn there. And in the English, it's called hell. And it's a physical representation of hell. And Judas, even though he acknowledged he was a sinner, he did not come back to Jesus in repentance. And he did not trust Jesus in salvation. He did not believe Jesus was who he said he was. And so now this is a visual representation that Judas went to hell. He didn't go to hell because he hung himself. He went to hell because he did not believe Jesus is who he says he is, even though he was with him for 3 years. Verse 9, then was fulfilled what had been spoken by the prophet Jeremiah, saying, and they took the 30 pieces of silver, the price of him on whom a price had been set by some of the sons of Israel, and they gave them for the potter's field as the Lord directed me. And that's from Jeremiah 32. You guys can look at that later. Now, Jesus still hasn't slept, and Judas has hung himself. Now Jesus stood before the governor, and the governor asked him, are you the king of the Jews? What did Pilate ask Jesus?
Are you the king of the Jews?
Yeah. So you need to remember, Judea is not its own country at this point in the story. They're a province of Rome. And he's saying, are you committing treason here, Jesus? That's what he's asking. And how did Jesus respond? He says, you have said so. You say it, man. But when he was accused by the chief priests and the elders, he gave no answer. So, what are the chief priests and the elders trying to do with him? Confess to treason. Treason against Rome. They've already got him on blasphemy, which is punishable by death, and now they're wanting him to confess to treason, so Rome will do their dirty work for them. Verse 13, then Pilate said to him, do you not hear how many things they are testifying against you? And Pilate's like, dude, claim your innocence, please. Verse 14, but he gave them no answer, not even to a single charge, so the governor was greatly amazed. Let's put yourself in the picture. Jesus has had the worst night of his life, and he hasn't slept yet. And I don't know about you, but I get a little cranky when I'm overtired. And Jesus says nothing. And the Jews have accused him of blasphemy, and now, without uttering a word, he is going to be accused for treason. Pilate's never seen something like this before. He's blown away. Verse 15. Now at the feast, the governor was accustomed to release for the crowd any one prisoner whom they wanted. And they had then a notorious prisoner named Barabbas. Have you guys ever heard of Barabbas before? No? Yes, no?
Yes.
Yes, okay. This is an amazing word study. But before we get into this word study, according to the scripture, what kind of prisoner was Barabbas?
Murderous.
Notorious. He's a well-known lawbreaker. I want you to keep that in the back of your mind. He has gone against Rome more times than you can count. He's an evil man. Now, Barabbas, this is an interesting study. Barabbas is a combination of two Greek words. Bar, meaning son of, and Abba, meaning father. Notice it doesn't say son of God. Son of the Father. A notorious sinner. A notorious criminal. Son of man, if you will. Son of man. Verse 17, so when they had gathered, Pilate said to them, "Who do you want me to release for you? Barabbas or Jesus, who is called the Christ? Do you want me to release the Son of Man for you, or do you want me to release the Son of God for you?" For he knew that it was out of envy that they delivered him up. Pilate knew, like, this is a junk trial. They just don't like this guy. We'll get the crowds on Jesus' side, and Jesus will be let go. Pilate did not want to crucify Jesus. You can read about that in the book of Luke. I'll give you the history on it. Pilate was in trouble, in great political trouble, with Caesar. There's already been a few uprisings. Historically, you can look at it. There's been a few uprisings, and Rome does not put up with uprisings. And Caesar has, in no uncertain terms, you can read about it in world history at this point, has told Pilate, "You have one more uprising, I'm killing you." So you know what's going on in the back of Pilate's head right now. Verse 19. Besides, while he was sitting on the judgment seat, his wife sent word to him, "Have nothing to do with that righteous man, for I have suffered much because of him today in a dream." Oh. Even the wife is saying, "Let Jesus go." Verse 20. Now the chief priests and the elders persuaded the crowd to ask for Barabbas and destroy Jesus. The chief priests knew how to work a crowd. They knew what was happening politically. And they're using politics to get their way. Oh, just a sec here. I got an alarm going off. My son's alarm was going off on his iPad. Now the chief priests and the elders persuaded the crowd to ask for Barabbas and destroy Jesus. And the governor again said to them, "Which of these two do you want me to release for you?" And they said, "Barabbas." Pilate said to them, "Then what shall I do with Jesus, who is called Christ?" And they all said, "Let him be crucified." And he said, "Why? What evil has he done?" But they shouted all the more, "Let him be crucified." The religious elite hated the God of the Word so much. They would rather see him crucified and an evil, notorious sinner be let free. Verse 24. So when Pilate saw that he was gaining nothing, but rather that a riot was beginning, he took water and washed his hands before the crowd, saying, "I'm innocent of this man's blood. See to it yourselves." He says, "Look, I'm going to do what you want me to do, because the only reason why I'm doing this is because if I don't, I know I'm getting crucified by Caesar. I'm innocent. I'm innocent in this man's blood. See to it yourselves." And look very carefully at what they say in verse 25. And all the people answered, "His blood be on us and on our children." And if you remember from our Acts study, I think it was chapter 4, the religious leaders were trying to say, "You're trying to pin his blood on us." It's like, you said that his blood is on you. It was 100% your decision. And you used politics to make sure this man died. Verse 26, then he released for them Barabbas, and having scourged Jesus, delivered him to be crucified. Before we get into the scourging, I want to talk about the release of Barabbas. A notorious sinner, the Son of Man, the Son of Father, not the Son of God, the Son of Man. A notorious sinner. Barabbas represents you, the notorious sinner. And Jesus didn't speak up, and he says, "I will take the place of Barabbas, the notorious sinner." And he was scourged. He had the cat of nine tails. And he got the 39, the 40 lashes minus 1, which is 39 lashes. And it was called the half-death. It was called the half-death is because half the people that went through the scourging died. And so he had 351 ribbons of skin ripped off of him. Hold your finger here and go back to Genesis chapter 3. I'm going to go to verse 20 and 21. And it says, And the man called his wife's name Eve because she was the mother of all living. And the Lord God made for Adam and for his wife garments of skin, garments of skins, and clothed them. God made the first sacrifice, and the first sacrifice had to be skinned. And here is the ultimate sacrifice, the true Lamb of God, going through what that lamb went through in the garden, being skinned. And having been scourged, Jesus, they delivered him to be crucified. Verse 27. Then the soldiers of the governor took Jesus into the governor's headquarters, and they gathered the whole battalion before him. That's a lot of soldiers. And they stripped him and put a scarlet robe on him. When it says that they stripped him, they stripped him. He was 100% naked, skinned alive. And they put a scarlet robe on him. And they twisted together a crown of thorns. And they put it on his head. Stop here. Go back to Genesis chapter 3. This is after Adam and Eve sinned. Verse 17, and Jesus is speaking to Adam. It says, and to Adam he said, because you have listened to the voice of your wife and have eaten of the tree of which I commanded you, you shall not eat of it. Cursed is the ground because of you. In pain you shall eat of it all the days of your life. Thorns and thistles it shall bring forth for you. This is a curse. And what did they put on Jesus? They skinned him alive. And they put the curse on Jesus. That crown of thorns. He's let the Son of the Father, the Son of Man, the notorious sinner, go. He's been skinned alive. And now he's taken the curse of Adam on his head. And they put a reed in his right hand, and kneeling before him, they mocked him, saying, Hail, King of the Jews! And they spit on him, and took the reed and struck him on the head. Took that reed and pounded the curse of Adam into his head. And when they had mocked him, they stripped him of the robe and put his own clothes on him and led him away to crucify him. Verse 32, and as they went out, they found a man of Cyrene, Simon by name, and they compelled this man to carry his cross. What does that compel mean? Just shy of brute force. Jesus was so wearied, he did not sleep the night before. He's gone through a fake trial. Now he's gone through a legal trial. Then he's been skinned alive, and he's got the crown of thorns beat into his head. It's a miracle he can walk. And when they came to a place called Golgotha, which means place of the skull, they offered him wine to drink mixed with gall. Now, gall, it's a numbing agent. This would be sour wine and a numbing agent. Because Jesus, this is going to get even more painful for you. If you think this is bad, it's going to get worse. But when he tasted it, he would not drink it. Why do you think Jesus would not take that numbing agent? Was Jesus a masochist?
No.
No. Remember last week, he's in the garden, in the book of Luke. He's sweating blood, and he's saying, Father, please take this cup from me. But not my will, but your will be done. That cup. Yeah, it's the wrath of God. It's the wrath of God. And Jesus knows that he needs to take the fullness of the wrath of God. He can't wimp out here and take a numbing agent. He has just been the substitute for Barabbas. And now he has to take a Barabbas' punishment. Metaphorically, take Barabbas, well, realistically and metaphorically, take Barabbas' punishment, and therefore, in doing so, taking your punishment. Verse 38, and when they had crucified him, they divided his garments among them by casting lots. It's like throwing dice. They're now gambling for his clothes. Here's Jesus, naked, everything exposed. He doesn't even look like a man anymore. Every bone is out of joint. And they're gambling for his clothes. Hold your finger here and go to Psalm 22. We're going to read all of Psalm 22. Or most of Psalm 22. It starts off with, my God, why have you forsaken me? Why are you so far from saving me from the words of my groaning? Oh my God, I cry by day, but you do not answer. And by night, but I find no rest. Yet you are holy, enthroned on the praises of Israel. In you our fathers trusted. They trusted and you delivered them. To you they cried and were rescued. In you they trusted and were not put to shame. But I'm a worm and not a man, scorned by mankind and despised by the people. All who see me mock me, and they make mouths at me. They wag their heads. He trusts in the Lord. Let him deliver him. Let him rescue him, for he delights in him. Yet you are he who took me from the womb. You made me trust you at my mother's breasts. On you was I cast from my birth, and from my mother's womb you have been my God. Be not far from me, for trouble is near, and there is none to help. Many bulls encompass me. Strong bulls of Bashan surround me. They open wide their mouths at me like a ravening and roaring lion. I'm poured out like water, and all my bones are out of joint. My heart is like wax. It is melted within my breast. My strength is dried up like a potsherd, and my tongue sticks to my jaws. You lay me in the dust of death. For dogs encompass me, a company of evildoers encircled me. They have pierced my hands and feet. I count all my bones. They stare and gloat over me. They divide my garments among them, and for my clothing they cast lots. Psalm 22 was written 1,500 years before the crucifixion. Psalm 22 is Jesus' eye view from the cross. And we're seeing it played out here. Let's go back to Matthew 27. Verse 36. Then they sat down and kept watch over him there. And over his head they put the charge against him, which read, "This is Jesus, King of the Jews." Then 2 robbers were crucified with him, one on the right and one on the left. And those who passed by derided him, wagging their heads and saying, "You who would destroy the temple and rebuild it in 3 days, save yourself if you are the Son of God. Come down from the cross." So also the chief priests with the scribes and elders mocked him, saying, "He saved others. He cannot save himself. He's the King of Israel. Let him come down now from the cross, and we will believe in him." No, you wouldn't. No, you wouldn't. He trusts in God. Let God deliver him now if he desires him. For he said, "I am the Son of God." And the robbers who were crucified with him also reviled him in the same way. This day is getting really bad for Jesus. Verse 45, now from the 6th hour, I want to stop here so you know what time of day it is. The first hour is 6 a.m. So this is noontime. Okay, the 6th hour is noontime. Now from the 6th hour, there was darkness over all the land until the 9th hour. So from noon till 3 p.m. And about the 9th hour, Jesus cried out with a loud voice saying, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani. That is, my God, why have you forsaken me? And how does Psalm 22 start out? My God, why have you forsaken me? The Father turned his face away. Because Jesus became sin on the cross the first time in eternal history, fellowship was broken between Father and Son. Verse 47. And now some of the bystanders hearing it said, this man is calling Elijah. This is a big thing, okay? Remember, this is Passover time. And in Passover, there was always a seat for Elijah because Elijah was raptured. He was taken up in the chariot of fire. And thinking, oh, Elijah's coming back. He's calling Elijah. And one of them at once ran and took a sponge filled with sour wine and put it on a reed and gave it to him to drink. And you might think this is a sign of compassion. It's not. It's the final insult. Sour wine. What is it? That's vinegar. Vinegar is a cleaning agent. It's a disinfectant. Why is it on a reed? Because they had outdoor toilets. And that's what was used to scrub the toilets. Sorry, my Wi-Fi took off there. That is what was used to scrub the toilet.
Is it frozen for everyone else?
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, I had to turn my Wi-Fi off. We had a little glitch. So that sour wine on a reed was the final insult. It's like sticking a used brush. It's like sticking a used toilet brush in Jesus' face.
Jason, you were frozen
I know.
right when you said, oh, okay.
Yeah, I fixed it all. And one of them ran and took a sponge filled with sour wine and put it on a reed and gave it him to drink. But the other said, wait, let's see whether Elijah will come to save him. When they're saying, grab the popcorn, boys, this might be a spectacle. And Jesus cried out again with a loud voice and yielded up his spirit. And behold, the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom, and the earth shook and rocks were split. Okay, go back to Genesis chapter 3. You guys remember me telling you that every doctrine in the Bible comes from, it can be found originally, the seedbed of each doctrine in the Bible comes from Genesis 1 through Genesis 11. Verse 22 of chapter 3 of Genesis. And the Lord said, Behold, the man has become like one of us in knowing good and evil. Now lest he reach out his hand and take also the tree of life and eat and live forever. Therefore God sent him out from the garden to work the ground from which he was taken. He drove out the man, and at the east of the Garden of Eden he placed the cherubim, which is an angel, and a flaming sword that turned every way to guard the way to the tree of life. Why did I share that with you? Because when you study Exodus and they are making the curtain for the temple, they were to embroider a cherubim in it, an angel. Now this curtain to the temple, to the Holy of Holies, the most holy place, behind this curtain was the most holy place, and there was only one person allowed in there a year, one time a year, and that was the high priest on the Day of Atonement. And inside there was the Holy of Holies, the throne room of God. And this was no ordinary curtain. This curtain was so big and so tall and so heavy, it took 150 men to open it. And at the moment Jesus died, that curtain was torn in two from top to bottom, signifying the curse is broken. Everybody now has full access to God. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The price has been paid. The curse atoned for. Verse 52, the tombs also were open, and many bodies of the saints who had fallen asleep were raised. And coming out of the tomb after his resurrection, they went into the holy city and appeared to many. Verse 54. I have a sneeze coming. When the centurion and those who were with him, keeping watch over Jesus, saw the earthquake and what took place, they were filled with awe and said, truly, this was the Son of God. The Gentiles saw it, and the religious leaders did not. There were also many women there, looking on from a distance, who had followed Jesus from Galilee, ministering to him, among whom were Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of James and Joseph, and the mother of the sons of Zebedee. I think we will finish up this chapter. We'll just go a few minutes. Well, we're not even to an hour yet. Verse 57. When it was evening, there came a rich man from Arimathea named Joseph, who also was a disciple of Jesus. And he went to Pilate and asked for the body of Jesus. And Pilate ordered it to be given to him. Now, this is a big thing. Because what would usually happen is they would just throw the bodies onto the ground and let the wild dogs eat them. Now, my mother went to Israel 2 years ago. It's a 15-minute walk from Mount Calvary, from Golgotha, to the tomb of Jesus. And Joseph of Arimathea carried the skinless, bloodied Jesus. I don't know how heavy he was, 180 pounds maybe, I don't know. All the blood and the bile all over his body. He carried Jesus 15 minutes to this tomb. The sweat coming down his face, Jesus' blood dripping all over him for 15 minutes as he's weeping over his friend. And Joseph took the body and wrapped it in a clean linen shroud and laid it in his own new tomb, which he had cut in the rock. And he rolled a great stone to the entrance of the tomb and went away. And Mary Magdalene and the other Mary were there sitting opposite the tomb. And the next day, that is after the day of preparation, well, the day of preparation is Friday. The next day is Saturday. Preparation for the Sabbath. The next day, that is after the day of preparation, which is the Sabbath, the chief priests and the Pharisees gathered before Pilate and said, "Sir, we remember how that impostor said, while he was still alive, after 3 days I will rise." He's already been dead. He was crucified Friday. It's Saturday. He died Friday. It's Saturday. He's going to rise tomorrow. That's day 3 on Sunday. You notice how they hated Jesus, but they kind of believed him? The next day, that is the day after the day of preparation, the chief priests and the Pharisees gathered before Pilate and said, "Sir, we remember how that impostor said, while he was still alive, after 3 days I will rise. Therefore, order the tomb to be made secure until the 3rd day, lest his disciples go and steal him away and tell the people that he has risen from the dead. And the last fraud will be worse than the first." Yeah. Then Pilate said to them, "You have a guard of soldiers. Go, make it as secure as you can." So they went and made the tomb secure by sealing the stone and setting a guard. These guards would have taken their jobs very seriously, because this is now an appointment by the governor. And if anyone came to steal Jesus' body and they let it happen, they themselves would be crucified. And now it's the Sabbath. And Jesus is in the tomb.